Hello, everyone. Welcome to Career Launcher. Welcome to CL's YT channel for law aspirants. We're continuing our series of called Let's Ace Reading Comprehension. As you know, we show you a passage which we read together and then solve some questions based on it. These passages and questions are similar to the passages and questions you get in any CLAT exam. So, if you're looking at watching a recording of this session, I would ask you to open the uh, video, mute it, read it on your own, pause the video, read the passages on your own, solve the questions, and then look at how I solved it. All right? Are you ready to start? Let me just get my pen in place and then we shall start. Okay. I do not like the red. I do not like to underline in red, so underline in blue instead. All right, let us start. This passage I have taken from the Indian Express. It's not an editorial, but it is in the opinion editorial page opposite the editorial. It's a passage based on international relations and politics. It's 433 words long, which is a little longer than a CLAT passage, but it's always good to read a longer passage and answer questions so that you can read a shorter passage faster. All right? All right. Now, if you are watching the recording, please mute me, pause the video, read the slide, read the entire passage, and then solve it with me. I'm going to read and summarize the passage. As the US and Russia negotiate Ukraine's future, without Ukraine at the table, India sees a painful historical parallel. So, what do you have? You have in the world United States and Russia negotiating what? Ukraine's future. It's like somebody is deciding about your life without you having a say, and that brings back painful memories to Indians because there is a parallel here. The exclusion of Ukraine mirrors the colonial arrogance of the 1947 partition, where Britain arbitrarily drew borders disregarding human and geopolitical consequences. So that is the same that what Britain did with India. They decided on India and Pakistan's future by drawing up a partition. They drew borders. They did not think of asking the people involved. So they did not give regard or pay attention or even think of the human and geopolitical consequences of drawing borders where there was none before. The message is clear. What is the message? Great powers dictate the destinies of small nations. US and Russia are powerful nations and they are dictating what the destiny of Ukraine would be, sidelining their sovereignty and self determination. Here you have Ukraine, which is an independent country, but it doesn't have any sovereignty or self determination. US and Russia are deciding its future. All right. Okay. History shows that peace deals without justice do not create lasting stability. So, this is some kind of a deal that the US and Russia are reaching about Ukraine. But historically, we know that such deals do not create lasting stability, they merely reward aggression. When you make peace deals like this, they are only rewarding aggression, they are not creating any kind of stability. During his presidency, Donald Trump's Afghanistan peace deal was effectively a withdrawal agreement ceding control to the Taliban. The result, the collapse of Afghan democracy, the rollback of 2 decades of progress, the loss of freedoms of women, minorities, and dissidents. This happened with Afghanistan. The US decided to withdraw. And so, what did it do? It rewarded aggression, the aggression of the Taliban. And so, what happened when the US made a deal like this? The consequences were the collapse of Afghan democracy, the rolling back all the peace progress that had happened during 2 decades, that is gone, and women, minorities, and dissidents are suffering because the Taliban is going to come down hard on them. This was not a genuine peace, it was an abandonment of Afghanistan's future. A similar dynamic is playing out in Ukraine. Reports suggest that Trump's approach involves preemptive concessions to Russia. Russia was the aggressor in Ukraine. Here, Trump has agreed on a peace deal that basically involves giving a lot of concessions to Russia, excluding Ukraine from its own fate and legitimizing an aggressor that violated international law. When Russia attacked Ukraine, it was an aggressor. It broke international law. It violated international law. It should have been punished. Instead, the US is brokering a peace deal where Russia gets a lot of concessions. Ukraine cannot have a word in edgeways. And who is deciding this? US and Russia, not Ukraine. So unjust. This is not a peace agreement. What is it? It is a geopolitical capitulation that weakens Ukraine and Europe alike. So the what US and Ukraine and Russia are doing, the result of that would be total surrender to Russia, and it would weaken Ukraine, you could weaken Europe. India understands the fight for dignity and territorial integrity. Its independence struggle reclaimed sovereignty from imperial powers that treated it like a pawn. Ukraine now fights for the same right to exist as a sovereign state, free from external imposition. Just as Britain's arbitrary partition fueled long term Indo Pakistani tensions, Trump's potential redrawing of Ukraine's future without its participation risks sowing instability for generations. Trump's action is similar to the British action. You know that Indo Pakistan tensions are unending. Same way, Trump is brokering a peace deal in Ukraine without Ukraine's assent, without Ukraine's participation, and that would risk sowing instability in the region, not just for now, for generations in the future. Next slide. India must act pragmatically, that means practically. To support a just resolution, it should be fair. First, it should leverage BRICS, IBSA, and SCO, the international organizations of which it is a part, to insist Ukraine's voice be included in negotiations. One, India must insist. Ukraine must be part of the negotiation. Second, it should warn Russia that an unjust settlement would create long term instability. Second, India can engage the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and UAE, both active in peace efforts, to push for Ukraine's inclusion. One, make sure Ukraine's voice is heard in negotiations. Make sure Moscow realizes it cannot have an unstable Ukraine. Second, make sure Ukraine is included in any attempt to redraw its future. As a major energy importer, India can highlight that Ukraine's stability is critical for for global economic security. Not just because Ukraine is a small state, you cannot just ignore it. Ukraine plays a part in energy. So, as a major energy importer, India can show that Ukraine has to be safe, Ukraine has to be stable for global economic security. You cannot ignore Ukraine. It also has a critical role to play in global economic security. Third, India should use its influence in the General Assembly. So there are three things the author wants India to do. It should leverage its influence in all these international organizations like BRICS, IBSA, SCO to insist that Ukraine has to be included in the negotiations. Second, it should also talk to Saudi Arabia, UAE to push for Ukraine's inclusion. It should highlight that Ukraine stability is crucial for global economic security. Third, it should use its influence in the UN General Assembly, Security Council, and G20 to oppose any settlement that puts Ukraine's sovereignty in risk, that disregards Ukraine's sovereignty. Finally, it should use its defense. So, India has good relations with Russia, it has defense ties with Russia. So, it should leverage its defense ties with Russia to influence Russia. It should leverage its trade relationships with the West to leverage its influence and promote a fair peace deal for Ukraine. Peace without justice, accountability, and strategic security is not peace. The kind of peace that Russia and US are trying to broker is that kind of peace. You cannot have that. That kind of peace is not peace because it comes without justice, without accountability, and without strategic security. It is merely a pause before another war. It's just a very temporary break in the war. Ceding Ukrainian territory to Russia will lay the foundation for future conflicts. It will set a precedent. Oh, Russia attacked Ukraine and it got a part of Ukraine. So, other dominating states would say we can also do that. So, it will lay the foundation for future conflicts, just as the partition left unresolved tensions between India and Pakistan. With its deep history of resisting colonial injustice, India must oppose a settlement dictated by great powers at the expense of smaller nations. You can't have great powers like Russia and US determine the sovereignty or settlement of peace with smaller nations. Anything less would revive an imperialist world order. If you don't do this, then you are reviving an imperialist world order where, oh, this is how, where great powers dominate. I think that line is missing in this passage. All right, an imperialist world order, or let's just remove this. Okay, let's keep it. All right, that's the passage. So basically, it's saying what's happening with Ukraine is wrong. Ukraine has to be included in negotiations, and also what India should do to ensure that Ukraine gets justice. All right, let's look at the first question. What's the primary purpose of the author? To discuss the implications of exclusion of Ukraine from negotiations of its own future? Yes, it is. But is that the main point? To criticize the exclusion of Ukraine from negotiations pertaining to it. It's not just the implications, he is also criticizing the exclusion. He's saying Ukraine should not have been excluded. After that, he talks about what happens. Correct? So between A and B, B is the correct answer. Right? Question 2. The author's tone, attitude towards the subject, that is the Ukraine, the peace deal that is being brought about between US and Russia without involving Ukraine, and the consequences of such a peace deal, which he says it's not a peace deal. Right? So the author is very confident of his view. So he is assertive. Cynical means negative. He doesn't have a negative outlook. He is looking at the situation objectively and looking at the consequences of what is happening. So he's analytical. He is assertive. He's not cynical. He is not skeptical. He's not doubting what will happen. He definitely is not aggressive. He is assertive. He is analyzing the situation and saying, if this doesn't happen, then this is going to happen. So he's very confident of in stating his views. Therefore, the correct answer is option A, assertive. What cannot be inferred from the passage? So, three options can be inferred. What is the option that cannot be inferred? Peace agreements that exclude the affected nation are unstable. Yes, we can infer this because he says what happened in Britain when during partition in India. India's voice was not taken into account. Britain just arbitrarily drew burdens, and what happens? So there was actually, and second thing, it talks about the peace deal that is made between US and Russia about Ukraine, excluding Ukraine, is not going to create peace in the region. It's going to increase instability in the region. Therefore, this can be inferred. So this is not the right answer. Trump's potential approach to Ukraine resembles past geopolitical mistakes. This also can be. He talks about past mistakes, past geopolitical mistakes, like what happened in India during partition and other things. India sees parallels between its colonial past and Ukraine's struggle. This can be inferred. He says we see historical parallels in the first paragraph itself. India has to join forces with Ukraine in ensuring justice. No, India has to influence, join forces with international organizations and countries to ensure that Ukraine is included in the deal for its future. So D cannot be inferred. He doesn't say India and Ukraine on one side should join hands and fight with the rest. He says India should try to influence the BRICS nations and such international organizations. India should also try to influence the United Nations General Assembly, Security Council, influence the Gulf states, and try to ensure that Ukraine is included in any negotiations, in any peace deal which concerns its future. Right? Therefore, D cannot be inferred. D has extremely specific words which are not what the author implies. All right. Question 4. What can be concluded from the following lines? So basically read the following lines and see which one sums up the main point of the following lines. That's the answer. Anything less than a fair deal, including Ukraine, would, oh, this part is missing. Stronger states determine the fate of weaker states without consequence. That's the word which was missing. Where stronger states determine the fate of weaker states without consequence. That is the missing line in the passage, where stronger states determine the fate of weaker states without worrying about the consequence. That's the missing line. What does the concluding line mean? What can you sum up from it? Is the question. Peace agreements will continue to be dictated by major powers without considering. He is not saying that. He says if if Ukraine is not included in negotiations about its future, if countries don't take its sovereignty into account, then if that condition happens, then an imperialist world order will be revived where strong states do what they want with weak states without bothering about what's going to happen. So, this is not correct. An unjust settlement for Ukraine would legitimize imperial style dominations in international relations. If Ukraine doesn't get a just settlement, then imperial style dominance in international relations will be revived. So, B is the exact conclusion can draw from these lines. The correct answer is B. Question 5. The author is most likely to agree with which of the following statement? Which one aligns with the main argument or main theme of the author? A lasting peace can only be achieved through justice, accountability, and strategic security. Otherwise, it merely postpones future conflicts. What he said is if you don't have just settlement, then it's only a pause between two conflicts. So A sums that up. Let's look at the other option. True peace requires powerful nations to dictate terms to smaller states. This is exactly against the tone of the author. Author says dominant states, powerful states should not dictate terms to smaller states. Every state has the right to sovereignty, to self determination, which is, if you don't allow that, then it will be an unjust world order. So, B goes against that. Sustainable peace arises when aggressors are appeased. No, the author is against appeasement of aggressors. He is saying what is going to happen now, what Trump, the concessions Trump is doing is trying to appease the aggressor, which is going to only further increase the instability in the region. So, this also contradicts the author's tone. Peace is best endured when international negotiations prioritize economic stability and trade partnership. The author is talking about a nation's right to sovereignty and self determination as being more important than anything else. So, D is also incorrect. Therefore, A is the correct answer for question 5. All right. Question 6. Which of the following words in the passage means surrender? Integrity means honesty. Collapse means breakdown. Capitulation means surrender. Therefore, our correct answer is C, capitulation, which has been used in the passage. All right, I hope you got your questions right. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat box. We'll look at it, and somebody in the team will raise the question or doubt with me, and I will answer it. Join me again next time, same time, same day. Until then, bye bye.